Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Attract and Stand Out Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Darlene Hawley. This year's summit is all about building a profitable personal brand and business that allows you to authentically show up and connect with your audience. And I'm so excited to be featuring so many amazing business owners that are sharing their powerful stories with you as part of the summit. Today, I'm interviewing one of my favorite ladies. Rae Bradford is the CEO and founder of Rae Media Group, a boutique strategic marketing communication firm based out of New York City. She helps industry leaders become world-renowned experts and has worked with everyone from startup founders to Inc. 500 executives to build their online reputation and audience. Her work has been featured in Forbes, HuffPost, the Bustle, ThriveGlobal, if I can say it, Talk Radio New York City, TEDx Lincoln Square, and Glamour magazine, and many more. Please help me welcome Rae. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Darlene. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for including me in this summit.
I am so glad to have you back for year two of my virtual summit. So thank you so much for coming back and sharing with us all the amazing work that you're doing in the world. I know that you've been super busy since we talked last year, and you've had an amazing year. So I'm glad to have you back and have you share all of your secrets for your success with us.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about, not everybody was with us last year, obviously. So tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of how you started your business.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm Rae Bradford. I have a company called Rae Media Group, and I wasn't always in PR. So I actually started my career in nursing, and I was a critical care nurse for 10 years before transitioning into running my own business full time. And a lot of people say, like, how do you go from nursing to PR? So I like to highlight the things that I did in both jobs that relate to one another, because I think it could be helpful for anyone who's thinking of reinventing your career, or also to figure out how not to totally dump your whole lifetime of experience to start something new when you're transitioning into entrepreneurship. So when I was a nurse, one of the things I did was translate the things that doctors say into words that patients and families could use to make decisions about their health care. Yeah. And I feel like I do that a lot now in PR and marketing. I help thought leaders or subject matter experts explain what they do in a way that's meaningful to their audience. And their audience isn't necessarily other people like them. So that's one of the common themes. And the other one is building relationships, being able to listen, have empathy for others, and really build relationships and partner with people to get messages out into the world. Building relationships with strangers every day at work as an introvert for 10 years, it helped me get really good at understanding the way people talk about themselves and the way people ask questions and the way people don't ask for help and things like that we do in our everyday lives that are just amplified when we are in those vulnerable situations, like being in the hospital. So now going to media companies, approaching editors and producers, asking them what kinds of stories they are showing on their platforms feels a lot easier, because I'm helping them do their job rather than helping someone make life-changing or life-ending decisions sometimes. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up transitioning along the way, meeting people, building those relationships, and just letting myself be kind of guided to this path where I listened to my audience and what they wanted. And what they wanted to know was how I got featured in the media every 2 weeks for the first year of my business, which then continued on beyond that first year. And so listening to them, I was like, well, this is what they want, and these are the skills that I can teach.
That's amazing. I love that you said that you learned like early on, like how to share like what the doctor was saying to the patient and how you use that in your business today, because I think one of the things I see, especially in the online world, is so many people use like jargon, or they use words that they might know from their industry, or because, you know, that's what they like, the technical terms. But sometimes we forget that when we're talking to our actual ideal clients and our audience, they don't always know what those technical terms are. So I love that like you learned that early on and like we're able to grasp that piece of it to share with your audience and like how to connect at a deeper level. Cause you're like, we need to like lay this out in a better way. Like it doesn't have to be like doctor speak, like, cause we've all been at the doctors, right? Where the doctor's like, well, this, and this. And you're like, what the heck does that mean? Am I dying tomorrow?
Yeah.
They're like, no, you have high blood pressure. And you're like, oh, okay. Like I'm not dying. Good.
Right.
So I know that you work a lot with your clients for kind of showing up in the online space the same as they do when they're in person. Can you talk a little bit about like what you find is like the best way to make sure that you're showing up, whether you're on an interview like the summit today versus meeting somebody for coffee in person, or even just writing like a sales copy message online? How do you show up always as your authentic self without like trying to be somebody else?
That's a great question. And it's one of my favorite things to talk about because I think we naturally show up differently online and in person. And it depends, I think, on whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert, because the way that you are when you're in front of your computer, sitting in the comfort of your own home versus in a room full of 100 or hundreds of people is going to be different. And that's something that we understand, but it's not something that our audience understands. So your audience expects you to be the same person that they think of in their head when they're reading your copy, when they're engaging with your social media content. They already have an opinion or an idea or a bias against you. They've put you into a box in their head where they are reading the tone of your voice. They're editing a lot about you. So when they meet you in person and they expect you to be a certain way after a keynote speech or a presentation, and they come up to you and then you don't meet their expectations, they feel like they can't trust you anymore. And the whole point of marketing and PR and advertising is to help people know you, like you, and trust you. So if you've put all this work into helping people know you, helping people like you, and then you blow it when they get to trust because they met you in person, then it's so heartbreaking, like for lack of a better word. I think It's really heartbreaking, and not to discourage you from ever speaking on a stage or going out in public, because I think you should, but I also think you first need to be aware of how you show up. So for the introverts who are listening or watching, introverts tend to really enjoy writing and going really deep and being really vulnerable in their writing. And you might like journaling, or you like to sit by yourself and recharge. Maybe you like reading books. And so writing copy or writing posts on social media might come really naturally to you. It might be really easy. Writing blog posts might also be really energizing for you. So when you're writing, you're pouring your heart and soul out there into this stuff and posting it on the internet, and people are reading it, feeling something, really connecting with you. But as an introvert, when you get in front of people, you might notice that you're that person at the networking event by the food, looking down at your phone, not making eye contact, staring at the ground, and not smiling, and your shoulders are kind of hunched over, and you're like, no one talk to me because. And so when you show up that way, you're not as open and vulnerable as you are online. And so you have to really connect with your inner vulnerability and recognize how you can express that comfortably as an introvert at an event. And I think there's a difference between faking it till you make it, or putting on a mask, or having a public persona, versus really showing up confidently. And when you change your body language, you change your confidence. And it doesn't mean that it's not still draining. As an introvert, an event is still going to drain you, and you need to factor that into your calendar to take a day off afterwards, or take the afternoon off to recharge. But when you are there in the moment and it's an opportunity for you to take your mission and your why and your purpose for doing the work that you're doing and allow other people or invite other people to access that information through you, it's not about you anymore. And so putting your shoulders back, smiling at events, setting the intention to meet at least one person. Like as an introvert, I think of who's the scariest person to meet at this event. And it's usually the person speaking or the event organizer, just to tie in the PR background. Like that, those are the people that I'd want to meet. So I set the intention to at least go and introduce myself to those two people if I don't meet anyone else. Like I don't need to meet 100 people, and that doesn't sound fun to me, but being really specific about who I want to meet at that event is how I navigate it. And then I also think a lot of people get hung up on, how do I introduce myself? Do I say the elevator pitch? Do I tell them my company name? Like what do I say? So good rule of thumb, just walk up to someone, shake their hand and say, "Hi, I'm Tara," or insert your first name. Yeah. And that's it. Let them be curious about you. Let them ask questions. And so that's what I would do if I'm an introvert. If I'm an extrovert, I probably have a really hard time writing. And so this is where, like, extroverts want to be talking. You want to be on video. You want to be on podcasts. You want the audio files, or sending audio messages on Facebook Messenger. That feels more comfortable to you. So if you have to write something, it might be more challenging for you to sound like yourself. And so if you're hiring a ghostwriter or someone to help you with that so you don't have to deal with it, then you just want to make sure that it really sounds like you when you're putting that message out there, so that when someone meets you in real life and talks to you, the way that you speak actually sounds like the way that that person's writing for you. And so one way that you can do this is by saying the words out loud. So as you're reading what has been written, say it out loud to yourself and listen to yourself saying it, so that you can hear, like, does this feel aligned? Does it feel authentic to me? Does it sound like something I would actually say before hitting publish? The other thing you can do if you're not hiring a ghostwriter is you can either record a voice memo to yourself, speak what you want to write into that voice memo, and then transcribe it. Or you can actually talk to your computer, and Google Docs has a voice typing option under tools that you can use, and talk to your computer and let the computer write what you're trying to say, and then go back and edit it for grammar and punctuation later. But that's one way to sound really authentic in your writing when it might not be the most comfortable thing. And then at an event, you probably have less problems or obstacles of showing up confidently because you're so friendly and outgoing and you have no problem approaching people. But sometimes that can also be a challenge because you're meeting a lot of people, and then you feel overwhelmed later, like, how am I going to follow up with all of these people? I have this stack of business cards, and I may have told someone I was going to do something and then I forgot who it was. So really staying organized when you're in that mode of meeting lots of people. And how do you do that? Do you write it on the back of the business card, what you told them that you were going to do? Do you connect with them right there on LinkedIn or through email and send the email with the thing that you promised them in the moment so that there is no follow-up and then the ball's in their court? So really trying to find something that works for you, that cuts down on the amount of time that you have to spend sitting on a computer typing and writing again after the event, doing the thing that maybe you would typically not enjoy doing.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, because you're right. Like, depending on your personality, and if you're an introvert or an extrovert, I classify them in the middle, like, and it depends on the day. Some days I'm very introverted, and then other days, like, I'm more extroverted and I love getting out and connecting. But it's so true. Like, you have to find that balance for yourself for how you're going to show up so that you're the same, whether you're in person or showing up online.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that, I know you mentioned earlier, like sometimes we like wear we don't want to like wear a mask or fake it till you make it. Like people say those different things. What are some of the ways that we can make sure that we don't fake it till we make it, or we wear a mask and try to be somebody that we're not?
That's a great question. And I just want to highlight the importance of not faking it until you make it, or not giving that advice to people, because if you're talking to someone who has imposter syndrome, which means you feel like a fraud, or you feel like you're not good enough, or you're afraid that people are going to find out that you're not as smart as they think that you are, or something like that, which this happens to anyone who's starting something new. So if you've ever been at the beginning of something, as kids learning how to walk, they probably don't experience imposter syndrome. And we could learn a lot from watching little kids fall down and get back up until they learn how to run. But as adults, we develop this idea that we need to have it all figured out the very first time we try to do it, whatever that thing is, whether it's starting a business, learning to do your own marketing, developing your personal brand, writing a social media post, writing an article. And there's also this fear that other people aren't going to like what you have to say, that keeps you totally like paralyzed and stuck. So giving that advice to someone who has imposter syndrome, fake it till you make it, has them thinking like, I'm already faking it and I'm already afraid that someone's going to find out that I'm a fraud. And so it doesn't feel very good. Like, why would someone give me that advice? And it just helps them stay in their head and not ask for help and not feel confident in what they're doing, because that keeps them stuck, that idea. And also for yourself, if you're faking it until you make it, you're not really accessing your strengths, and you're not really connecting with your why, your purpose. You're not embodying who you are. If you are showing up as yourself, then you don't have to fake anything. You can just be yourself, which I know is very vague advice, just be yourself. But if you feel like you have to fake anything, then I would have you connect with, like, what is that feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? What does it feel like? Does it feel like anxiety? Does it feel like anger? Does it feel like fear? And what is that trying to tell me? Because sometimes fear or anxiety is telling us that we are about to do something that means a lot to us. Like, it means a lot to me to get my message out into the world. So before I get on stage and I'm about to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, I do feel that way. I do feel scared or anxious about it. And it's because it's so important to me. But if I had to fake that and not be vulnerable about it, then it would just make me feel like small, or like I was hiding, or like I needed to fit into a box. And it would prevent me from expressing myself the way that I really want to. It would prevent me from showing that passion or energy or excitement, because I would be like, well, how am I supposed to act to hide the fear? Like, if I'm more focused on hiding the fear so no one knows I'm afraid, rather than showing up and being passionate and excited about what I'm talking about, then I show up differently.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I notice a lot online too is the imposter syndrome comes in because we're seeing other people maybe in our industry or other influencers that we're watching, and we're watching how they're doing their business and how they're showing up. And we try to emulate what we see them doing, because we're like, oh, they got, 500 likes on this post or 1 million comments. And we're trying to like, well, if that's working for them, it's going to work for us too. So then we go out and we try to do what we see other people doing, but that's not authentic to who we are and how we show up to the world. So what are like your best tips for like those that might be seeing other influencers doing things certain ways? How do we make sure we do it our way without trying to do it like we might see other people be doing?
That's so true. And I just want to add on to that, Darlene. If I tried to speak with an accent that was not naturally how I speak, like if I tried to sound like I was from the UK, people would know I was faking it. People would know that that's not me. They'd be like, what is she doing with her voice? If, for example, I was following someone who had that accent. And so copying what someone else is doing and not making it your own is the same thing. People know that that's not really you because you have followers who do know you in real life, who have met you before and heard you speak before you started doing this. And they're going to know, and they're going to stop following you because they're going to be really confused about what you're doing. So one way that you can be in all of the noise is first to remember that marketing and PR and sales and advertising, every time someone's writing something, whether it's a book, a social media post, an ad, they're writing it to a specific person. And so if you pretend that you're talking to that one person who needs to hear your message and you're being real with them about what you want to say, it's going to come across really authentic. But as a consumer as well, on the other side of it, those influencers and those business owners are writing their things to a specific person. And if the person they're speaking to is not the same person you're speaking to, then your audience isn't going to connect with it. But also, if you're not the person that that message was meant for and you're reading it, then you don't need to really engage with that content. Even though you admire them, you like the way that they have built their business, like if the message isn't for you, then it's going to trigger you. And that's why they say when you're polarizing, when you're making people mad, that's actually a good thing. And not necessarily mad, but when you have a message that's polarizing, it means it's specific and niched down enough that you're speaking directly to the people who need to hear it. And you've given yourself permission to not be for everyone. And there's that quote, if you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. And it's so true that if you have this general blanket message that's not authentic to you, but also not connected to your purpose or why you're doing this and the message that you want to send, then it's going to fall on deaf ears because people don't know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
The people who love you and really connect with your message are going to want more of it. And the people who are turned off by it are going to go away. And that's great. That's why I say when people unsubscribe to your newsletter, that's good because they're not your people. Your message is not resonating with them. And that means that you're getting more specific.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I love that you brought up like making sure you're talking to your people and you're attracting the people that you're meant to. And then you're also like repelling those that your message is not for, because so often we're trying to share our message in a way that's, we try to confuse ourselves, I think, because we're trying to talk to everybody. Like you said, like when you talk to everybody, you're talking to nobody. And so often we're just like, but I want to get clients and I want to share my message with the world and my message can help everybody. And you're like, well, maybe, but not really. Like if you're talking to everybody, then you're not attracting those specific people that are actually your people, your tribe, the ones that you're going to connect with, the ones that you're going to be able to help the most. So
right.
I love it.
Yeah. And I just have to give one more example about this before we move on to a different topic, because even when you're speaking to that one person, you're not excluding everyone else.
Yes.
And I think that's a common misconception when you really want clients and you're like, something has to work, I need clients. You think that excluding people means you're narrowing things down too small and you might miss a sale or you might miss an opportunity to work with someone. And the opposite is true. And an example of this I'll use for my own business in my podcast. I started a podcast called For the Love of Giving, and it's for givers. Actually, it's for selfless givers, people who just give to everyone and they just want to help all the time. And they sometimes neglect themselves. And so I started producing this podcast and I'm about 3 episodes in. And I had someone reach out to me who is not a selfless giver, but who is curious about how adopting those behaviors might help him be more happy and successful in his work. And so there's actually research that supports this. And I didn't believe it was true until this happened. But the research on giving is that when a bunch of givers are in a room with a taker, the taker actually becomes more generous. And I'm finding that with my podcast and my audience, as I speak to givers, the so quote unquote takers in my audience are curious about how they can become more generous. So you never know who's going to be impacted by your message. And it might be that the people you thought you were helping aren't the only people who are benefiting from this message. Like, I'm not a parent, and I have people ask me for advice about parenting with my coaching clients. So yeah, the message could be applicable to multiple areas, and that's how you grow and that's how you scale your brand later. But when you're first starting out, you really need to be specific.
Yeah, no, and that's such a great example too, because you don't know who you're going to attract. And sometimes your message is like I attract a lot of moms because I am a mom and I talk a lot about like my kids and my messaging, or I share stories of like parent stuff. But then, yeah, you get people who aren't parents who I coach, and I get like most of my messaging goes, I feel like it maybe like talks more to women, but I coach a lot of men clients as well. So it's that balance of knowing you're talking to one certain group kind of, but other people are listening and are intrigued. So that doesn't mean that's all that you're going to work with. So if you market to women, entrepreneurs who have no kids and, I don't know, live on the beach or whatever, you still might get somebody who's the total opposite of that, that's called in because they resonate with how you're speaking and what you're sharing about. Or they're intrigued by it too. Like with your example, with your podcast, like people that are quote unquote takers, maybe they want to learn to be better at giving. They want to show up in a different way. And so by listening to your podcast, it's going to spark ideas and help them be more inspired to give more versus maybe taking as much.
Right. And so when you're thinking about your audience with that in mind, both of those examples that Darlene and I shared, think about the character traits that that person has that are maybe not gender specific if it doesn't have to be. Like if you're not talking about menopause or something that is inherently a female thing or a male thing, and it could be more generalized, think about the qualities that person has. Are they a perfectionist? Are they a people pleaser? And what does that mean? And break it down into those things that make them who they are, rather than gender, age, occupation, and things like that.
Yeah, doing more of the psychographics versus the demographics of it. And like getting really deep too, like what is it that keeps them awake at 3 a.m. when they can't sleep? Those are the things that have the ripple effect for getting super clear with who your ideal client is and helping making sure that you're messaging in the right way. All right. So as we start to wrap this up, I have some fun questions to ask this year from my guests. So the first question I have for you is, I'd love to know if you have a morning routine, and if so, what does that look like for you?
I love that you asked this question because I used to have a really rigid morning routine with like sound healing and meditation and journaling, and then I got a dog. And I think the moms in the group can relate, and the other dog moms and maybe cat moms and dads, if there's any dads listening, that your life changes when you have someone else who's depending on you. So now my mornings are spent in Central Park. I live in New York City. So we go for a walk in Central Park every morning, which is actually really nice to be out in nature, even on the cold days or in the rain, and to just see all the dogs playing with each other. They can be off leash before 9 a.m. So we have to get there early and run around when they can all be free. So now I start my day with that. And then I make sure that I get in the other parts of my morning routine that have gotten pushed back to later in the day. I make time for them later.
I love that. And it's so true. Like as moms and pet owners, like as soon as our world shifts completely, and especially with your new puppy, like puppies get up with you, whether if you get up at 4 a.m. or 7 a.m., it doesn't matter. Like they're up when you're up, where your kids sometimes, like my kids will sometimes sleep in. So if I want to sneak downstairs for like 30 minutes by myself, if I get up at like 5:30, then I can do that. But my dog's always with me. So
Yeah, it's so true.
that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about what your favorite book is that you feel like has impacted your growth as an entrepreneur the most.
Oh, that's a big question. I've read so many great books, but I think the one I read every single year is Mike Dooley. He has an audiobook called, I think it's Leveraging the Universe. I have to get back to you on the title. It's really long and it's hard to remember, but he goes into how thoughts become things. And it's all about, oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot the name.
It's fine.
But it's like leveraging the universe and something else. I'll make sure you have it for the show notes.
Send me the name and I'll put it in the notes, because
yeah,
I always forget the name of books too. I'm like, it was a really good book by this person, and it was about something. You're like, what was it?
right. I mean, the other one that I'll give people who are listening who don't check the notes is Secrets of a Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. And that one was also really life-changing when I was further along in my business.
Awesome. Oh, wait. And you've learned a lot since you started your business. What would you tell your early entrepreneurial self if you could go back in time and like change one thing about how you started your business? What would that be? Or what would you tell yourself that you wish you knew?
I think when I first started out, I was side hustling and I was still working as a nurse, and I thought I had to pretend I was not a nurse and really start my brand from scratch. I felt like I was starting over instead of having it be a continuation of my career. And only recently have I started to connect those dots backwards to see how everything is connected and everything can be incorporated as part of my whole journey and all of my experience, rather than having it be abruptly cut off, where I felt like I had to disconnect from being a nurse because people wouldn't take me seriously as a business owner. So if I was going to go back to that moment, I would tell myself that I can incorporate my nursing experience into what I'm doing and make an even bigger impact by using that 10 years of experience that I had.
Yeah. And you do such a beautiful job of that now. And I think it's important too, because so often we don't like, you're right. We like break away from that old career because we're like, no, I'm starting my own business and I'm doing my own thing. And we forget that that's still part of who we are. It's still, those are the experiences that we're going to bring to the table that are going to help other people learn more from us, and people will be able to learn from what we've gone through with those experiences.
Right. So and it's your audience. It's your audience too. Like I thought I had to go to a completely different industry. And if I had stayed in healthcare, I think I would have made it a lot easier on myself. So remember that part too. You understand that audience. So if you can stay in that industry and that vertical, it might help you build momentum a lot faster.
Yeah. When I started my business, my background before that was retail management. And I was kind of like, no, I don't want to talk to anybody that has like a brick and mortar store. And I don't want to like have to deal with like inventory and customer service and like those pieces from like the retail side. But then I got some clients like a year afterwards, after I was coaching, that were in that type of industry again. And it was so fun for me to like remember all of those pieces from when I worked in retail management, and how I had so many extra tools that I had kind of forgotten about even, that I was able to share with them. And it helped so much just with my coaching business myself. And I was like, I totally forgot that I used to do this, or that I even knew that. But going back to that old industry, like, and just thinking about how I made an impact then helped so much with growing my clients' businesses now. So yeah, just using that information is so valuable.
Yeah, I agree.
And I have one more question for you to kind of tie in all the theme of the summit this year. What does attract and stand out mean to you?
Attract and stand out means being a magnet for opportunities, I think. And it makes me think of my networking days when I was doing a lot of networking, trying to figure out how I was going to start this business. I made sure I was in a room full of people who were not like me, and that was how I stood out. If you're in any room and you look around and you see other people who are the same as you, the same job, the same industry, the same beliefs, then you are stunting your growth by avoiding innovation and creativity and understanding new perspectives. And I think that me being the different person in all of those rooms was the thing that allowed me to grow in a different direction as quickly as I did.
I'm so glad you said that, because so many of my clients, when they come to me, they're networking with people that do exactly what they do. And I'm like, no, get out there and like go to different associations, meet people that are in totally different industries, because it's hard to stand out, like you said, when you're blending in so well with everybody else. So go out and connect with people that you haven't met before in different groups that you maybe thought weren't even the right group for you. Go try it. See if it works for you. See what kind of connections and what kind of magic. And like you said, that magnetic piece will come from being in a room with people that are not like you.
Right. And it invites them to be curious about you and to ask you questions.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Which is market research. Listen to the questions people ask you. That's your content. That's what people want to know about.
Yes. So true. Well, I know that you have an amazing gift for everybody as part of the summit. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I do. I have a bunch of free gifts on my website, but the one that I'm going to direct you to is for PR. I know we didn't really get to publicity yet, but I have a checklist on my website at tararaebradford.com/PR-checklist. And you can download the steps to helping you upgrade your online presence right now that don't involve pitching the media or putting yourself out there in a big way yet, but it's laying the foundation for you to be ready to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah. And as Tara alluded to earlier in our conversation, we didn't go too deep into it, but she's been featured what is it, once every week or every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks since she started her business. So she knows what she's talking about. And if you want help and guidance in getting your name out there in a bigger way, Tara does an amazing job at doing that. So definitely take advantage of her free gift and learn more about her.
Thank you.
And tell everybody where you like to hang out so that they can connect with you on social media as well.
Yeah, I think the best way to keep in touch would be on my email list, which you'll be on when you get the PR checklist, because the podcast has been my latest audience that I'm growing and thing that I'm putting a lot of energy into and excited to share. It's For the Love of Giving on iTunes, so that you can subscribe there as well if you don't want to get email reminders. And then if you want to follow me on social, I'm at Tara Rae Bradford on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tara, for spending time with us today and sharing all these amazing tips, because we forget sometimes how to behave when we're in person versus when we're behind the computer. So thank you for helping break that down a little bit for us so that we can show up authentically as our true selves.
Thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for being part of the summit and for listening.